Hi, I'm Ross Kenneth-Erkin, personal finance editor at TheStreet.com. Welcome to the Moola Files. Today we're here with Mary Pilon, sports reporter at the New York Times. And Mary, you were recently in Alaska covering how climate change is affecting the Iditarod. Enlighten us. What's going on there?
Sure. So it's been an unusual winter for mushers. Most of them live in places like Minnesota, but a lot of them are in Alaska, as you might guess.
Sure.
Willow, Alaska is kind of this historic mushing mecca. So it's one of the reasons mushers love it is there's always a lot of snow. It's always very, very cold. But what we saw this year is a lot of races were being canceled or had their trails changed. And that's a huge problem for the mushers because they rely on these races to not only qualify for the Iditarod, but also as training. They're really, really crucial. And a lot of these mushers also have businesses doing dog sled tours and things like that. So it's been really hard if you don't have snow in Willow where you live and where your dogs are. A lot of the mushers I talked to said, we don't have the money to go drive, 8 hours or wherever to go where there's more snow. So it's been a really, really tough winter for people who are already in a business that doesn't have, say, the sponsorship of pro football or pro basketball.
Sure. So as the ice melts, so does their business.
Exactly. And we don't know what next winter is going to bring, but it has been a longer term concern. And you're also seeing things like some mushers are breeding dogs with thinner coats. It can be dangerous for the dogs if it's too hot. And we're going to see a lot slower races, which contrasts that with the Olympics, right? So a lot of the Olympic venues in London were designed because we wanted to see records broken. We wanted to see people run faster. If this weather holds up with the Iditarod, they're going to be slower races. So it's kind of going opposite of what we see elsewhere in sports, where you want people to break records. You want that kind of history-making stuff going on.
Sure. This isn't the only dog competition you've covered. Tell us about the Westminster show. You've really gotten an inside glance.
Sure. So we actually did quite a bit of reporting on Westminster this year. And one of the things about the dog show world that I don't think people realize is that the dog show isn't just one event of the year. It's not just these 2 days in New York. These dogs go on something called campaigning, where they go to dog shows every single weekend in some cases.
It's intense.
People will buy ads for their dogs in these dog publications. It can cost a couple $100,000 to get a dog into Westminster. So the business of these dogs and getting them there is way more complicated than often people think.
Interesting. And the poisoning scandal, what's the economics behind that?
Sure. So this story was one of the more unusual, I would say, that I've written about. A couple of weeks after the dog show, maybe not even that long, Cruz, a Samoyed, which is one of those white, fluffy, adorable breeds.
A little marshmallow type.
Yeah, about 3 to 5 days. About 5 days after Westminster, he was at another show in Denver and he died, and the vet thinks it was due to rat poisoning. Now, the mystery is still unfolding, but what it did do is ignite a lot of the tension between animal rights groups and folks in the dog show community. So immediately there are accusations that, was he poisoned? Was something, was it the result of extreme activism or someone who's crazy? Or was this just a dog being a dog? And there's all sorts of chemicals here in New York. And even though his handler says, I was with this dog every minute, I watched him, there's no way he could have gotten anything, or very little way. It's become this talking point between these two sides. And again, the dog show, you just think, oh, it's the dog show. You don't realize how much tension there is among these different groups.
Absolutely. In terms of other scandals, I have to ask about your coverage of Livestrong.
Right.
Tell us about how the business has weathered the storm or not post the Lance Armstrong fallout.
It's going to be hard to say because the Lance Armstrong case, legally, there's a lot more to happen, right? There are the civil cases, what his sponsors are going to be doing. That's going to be untangling on the legal front for a while. But Livestrong is charity. We've already seen Lance remove himself from that.
Right.
But one of the things that we looked at was even though corporate sponsors seem to be standing by Livestrong, because of the work they do towards cancer survivorship, a lot of Livestrong's money comes from the sale of merchandise. So in other words, you go to a Nike store, are you going to buy the yellow bracelets, the yellow running gear, the yellow water balls? I mean, we've seen these things everywhere.
Yeah, there's yellow up the wazoo.
Exactly. So that's something that remains to be seen, and we won't know that for a while, and that falls a lot more on kind of the public appetite for this brand and whether they're going to reinvent themselves as a group that's devoted to cancer survivorship separate from Lance, but it's pretty amazing that they have this brand that for years thrived on being so strongly linked to one of the most famous athletes in the world, and now all of a sudden they really have to rethink what their approach is.
Absolutely. Mary Pilon, sports reporter at the New York Times. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you
This
for
has
having
been
me.
the Moola Files.